Well, with more on the by-election and the riding of Toronto-St. Paul's, we're now joined by the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, Tonda MacCharles. Hello, Tonda.
Hey, Michael.
You know, we don't often cover by-elections, but we do when the incumbent party's in trouble in the polls, as they are right now, and we're so close to an election, 1 year away. And when we talk about a riding that is traditionally one party but might flip, so when we talk about Toronto-St.Paul's, how worried are the Liberals right now about that riding?
I think that they're pretty worried. I've spoken to a lot of Liberals who've done some campaigning in the riding. I was on the ground in the riding, talking to the campaigns and their managers and to people on the street. And there were many tells there. There are tells that neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives want you to go out door knocking with them. They don't want you to hear the actual reaction they're getting at the door. That's one. But the other big tell to me that Liberals are worried is not just that all those cabinet ministers, some 13 I think, have gone in to help campaign for Leslie Church. That's not completely unusual in a certain respect. She's a popular and longtime Liberal government staffer, so she has a lot of relationships she can draw on. But what they're telling me that they are hearing at the door has worried them. In some cases, they're saying they're having trouble identifying a Liberal vote. In other cases, polite nods of an acknowledgement, but they are also hearing at the door what everybody's hearing about concerns about, what's really going on with the Liberals, how long is Trudeau staying on, what about Poilievre? So we could talk about that.
Yeah, and we will in a second. But, I'm kind of wondering, if the Liberals don't hold this riding, if they lose the riding, or even if they win by just a small margin, what does that mean for the party's electoral hopes in 2025 when we're talking about Toronto, which has been Fortress Toronto since the Chrétien years?
Yeah, 416, the Liberals have owned it, right? They've painted it red pretty much every election, except for the odd maybe NDP riding that pops up from time to time, but then switches back. Look, it means that their fortress is no longer secure. It means that not only is their fortress no longer secure there, but that the greater GTA is in play for them in a way that the Conservatives are very excited about, and in play for the Conservatives, I mean to say. And you can extrapolate that to Greater Vancouver, the Greater Montreal area. It means that the urban vote that's been the core of Liberal support and 3 mandates for Prime Minister Trudeau is no longer a guarantee.
Yeah, and to that, when you talk about the Greater Toronto Area, the surrounding regions of the 905, easier to flip for the Conservatives. But if they can flip downtown Toronto, a riding in downtown Toronto, that would be very worrisome. You mentioned a little bit about what the candidates are hearing at the door. When you were speaking to voters in the riding itself, what were they raising issues, or were they raising questions about leadership? Which one's determining this vote?
So here's the thing I found fascinating. You ask the candidates, you ask the campaigns, and they'll tell you, here are the top issues in this riding. It's housing, affordability, cost of living, groceries, whatnot, and anti-Semitism, the rise of anti-Semitism and attacks in the riding. It's a riding that has the 5th largest Jewish population in Canada. So, the Middle East conflict is in play according to the campaigns. But when I stopped people on the street and asked them about what's in play for you, to a person, it was leadership. It was the question of Justin Trudeau and his leadership of the Liberal Party and the government and through various crises, and their questions around Poilievre and the Conservative leaders. So, Justin Trudeau is a known quantity, and that's not necessarily the best thing at this moment because people are tired of him. And as so go the national polls, so goes the riding. I detected quite a lot of resistance to the idea that he would be leading the party to seek a 4th mandate. And on the other side of that is people questioning, they don't really know Pierre Poilievre. He's still a bit of an enigma to a midtown Toronto riding electorate. A lot of people are interested in what he has to say about affordability and housing, but they're not sure about the overall package. So I ran into a couple of people who said, first time ever, I'm a lifelong Liberal, I'm thinking about the NDP. The Greens, when I talked to their campaign manager, they're saying they're getting a lot of interest in what they do because none of the other parties are satisfying to voters. I think the leadership question is in play to a greater extent than perhaps the Liberals like to say it is. And, I don't think anyone's I think it's hard to say, what does this bode for Mr. Trudeau's future? Because I think he's pretty much committed. until he's not,
Yeah.
to run again. But I think that we ought not to underestimate the impact of leadership in this race and beyond.
Okay, let's stick on leadership then, because I'm thinking about the Liberal Party convention that happened last year. At the start of summer last year, and when I was speaking to Liberals at that convention, they were very clear, even though they knew that it would be hard to get an electoral win, because historically, prime ministers don't stick around this long and trying to essentially get a fourth mandate. But they made the argument that they believe that once people really scrutinize Pierre Poilievre, they will stay with Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. Did you get a sense of that at all? Because again, this is a historical Liberal riding.
This is what the Liberal campaign is banking on. And this is what the Prime Minister has said this week, that the choice is not yet before the voters, and that in the broad scheme of things, next year, when it comes time for Canadians to turn their minds to a choice, that they'll land on him. But there's a choice immediately in front of electors in Toronto-St. Paul's in the next, well, already advanced polls have finished, and next Monday is the actual vote. But that immediate choice is going to not just be an opportunity for voters to send a message to Trudeau. It's going to be a message to his Liberal caucus and cabinet colleagues. If you think that you can bank on my vote, you can't count on it. And so they may be trying to push the Liberal caucus and cabinet into sending a message to the Prime Minister. But do I think that anybody's doing that right now? Not a chance. They are not. They are surprisingly loyal.
Okay, loyal at this point. But
at this point.
Okay, extrapolate though, right? Because
right.
if the Liberals do lose St. Paul, or even if they win it, but with just a small margin, what does that do to cabinet unity? What does that do to party unity within the Liberals?
I mean, I think a lot of us see this election as a turning point for that question, just as we saw, a number of years ago when the Progressive Conservative and the Canadian Alliance vote was split. So the vote on the right was split. The Perth by-election became a pivotal point, a motivator for Stephen Harper to unite, and Peter MacKay to unite the right. A number of years ago, even when Harper was in power, sort of one of the early by-elections, or I guess the by-election 2 years before Harper lost government, is a moment like this, where in Manitoba, a safe Conservative seat that they'd won by a mile, suddenly the margin went down to 2%. A lot of Conservatives think this kind of vote swing and a drastic drop in the Liberal vote share in Toronto-St. Paul's will be the harbinger of the greater fall of the collapse of the Trudeau government and vote next year. And they want Liberals to see it that way. Look, the spin is crazy. It's everybody's talking about, turnout in by-elections is never great. There's no consequences for an electorate to vote against a government. But in this case, I think you should understand that Toronto-St. Paul's voters are pretty smart. They've got their eye on a lot of issues, and I think that they will be looking at this as a pivotal point as well.
A very engaged electorate, if you will. So listen, Tonda, of course, we're watching it very closely. Always appreciate the time.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you for
Michael.
that.